Okay, so first off, a disclaimer. I'm not a true representative of the Venus Project yet. So these are my interpretations of this subject. And today is the 16th of October, and it's for TVP International, our event. And these are a few rules that we usually go through. I'm just going to go through them quickly. So we don't promote other things at these sessions. Now, we're not so many people, but usually, you know, if we're 15 or 10 people, if somebody starts promoting something, then you know, it takes a lot of time, and that's not what these sessions are about. Here we try to explore the Venus Project, and we don't talk about conspiracy theories because we have enough difficulties talking just about this subject. And if you, for some reason, feel that you want to volunteer or you want to assist, we can talk about that afterwards, or I can direct you if that is something you would like to do. And I don't see my role here as somebody here to debate or convince you. That's not what I see myself as. I'm just here to assist you in the best way I know how. But not really, I'm not here to argue. I'm just here to present it. So that's why I said to you, this is an exercise of thinking differently, and let's see how it goes. So I want to talk about human nature and how we view it. It's a word that is tossed around a lot. And I'm going to use a movie quote. I forgot the name of this movie. Does anybody remember this movie?
It's Watchmen. This is my favorite movie, and the guy in blue, who is Doctor Manhattan, is my favorite person ever. Like someone have Superman, so this is guy. It's a very powerful guy. Yeah.
So we have this superhero, god, whatever you want to call him, and I'm just going to read his resume of his superpowers, okay? So he's invulnerable, immortality, perceives time in non-linear fashion. Great, that would be great. Cosmic awareness, understanding of the workings of the universe. Great. Can create new universes. But Marge, he has a weakness. There is one thing he can't do. He can do everything, but this one he can't do. And that is to change human nature. So he can do everything in the world, but this in the movie before he blasts somebody, that's what he says. He says, I can do all these things, but I can't change human nature. And I want to take our God and I want to go to the dictionary and see how it defines human nature. Human nature, and the example is what I want. You can't change human nature. Okay, so this is the way we are being brought up, that somehow human nature is in a bubble. It can't be affected regardless of the circumstances. That's how it's usually tossed around. So here we have the dictionary, one type of God, and a real God, and both of them say, hey, everything else you can change, but human nature, no, no, no. And we say, we have a difficulty with this. Because when we see a person like this, we might feel when they are grown up, and you might say that this is the way the person is. This is how they are. It's in their nature. When you don't understand it, when people don't understand it, that's how they view them. They say, this is the way they are. It's in their nature to hate. But when they see this picture of children, then usually they have a different attitude. And they say, oh, how sad. They're being influenced. Why isn't it in their nature? Maybe they are this way. But we don't say that. We say, oh, they're influenced. You're affecting them. So suddenly there's a contrast. A grown-up, we give up hope. We say, hey, it's in his nature. Children, we say, they're being affected. And the way we view it is that life is full of strings. and it's pulling on people in different directions. It isn't in their nature to be anything. It is the culture influencing them, their environment, the books they read, all the things that can affect them. And most people are not used to thinking about this subject in this manner. And they might say, well, how come, I saw two twins. They came from the same mother and father, same house, but they're so different. If everything is environment, how come they are different? And the way we look at it is that there is so many different experiences in life that you can't just simplify it and say they came from the same mother and father and they live in the same house. Imagine a child falling asleep, one of the twins, when they're watching a movie, and they didn't see the end of the movie. And the end of the movie affects the other one, but it was just a couple of minutes. Or going to the toilet and meeting a person that is very aggressive to them. That affects them, but it's just a short moment. And that's what we mean, that there are so many different things happening in life that change people. And the more you think about it, the more you will see these effects on people. So things such as love, such as relationships, those are also something we view as being done by culture. It isn't inborn in us to be, man and wife, to get married. This is influenced by our environment. Same with religion. Those are given to you. If you, as a child would be given the Bible and you take away, let's say 10 pages, can the child know, can the person, even if they grow up and they never get those 10 pages, will they reach those 10 pages? We can't understand how they would get something that isn't there, just somehow reaching those conclusions, say, hey, 10 pages are missing. No, they're given a package, and they're working within that package. Now, some people also say, well, what about survival? Isn't that human nature, that you want to survive? And I always think about a soldier that jumps on a grenade to save his friends. What happened to his nature of wanting to survive? He put it aside because he has been brought up to sacrifice. He saw something, he was influenced enough to say, or not to say it, but just to react by jumping on it. So what happened to survival when he gives himself up? Same with in Japan, when they had this nuclear meltdown, and they had to send people in to clean it up. And old people said, let me go in. They would survive longer if they said, no, I'm not going to go in there. It's in my nature to want to survive. Somehow they were brought up to say, no, I'm going to sacrifice myself. And the last point I want to get across is there's a short documentary on YouTube. There's a tribe, and they're called the Suicide Tribe. The way they are brought up is that when they reach around 30 years old, they look forward to killing themselves. Because in their culture, they believe that as soon as they die, they will be reunited with their family. So they have a circle that is, a loop that is going, is that, oh, my big brother killed himself to be with his father and mother. And when I get older, I'm going to kill myself so I can be with them. So what happened here? And this is what I mean, is that they have been influenced. It isn't something fixed. Now, the second word that creates problems in the way of thinking, the way we do, is free will. Free will to us is magic. That's what it is. Free will means to us that somehow a person is not affected by the surroundings. Whatever happens, they're in a bubble that is not affected. And we can't see that. We can't imagine anything in the world, in the universe, that is not affected. The planets affect each other. They go around, they're pulled around the sun. They don't choose to go around the sun, they're pulled. But somehow we have been brought up to think that people are not affected. Now, the conclusion is, for me, is that people use these two words, they use human nature when they think, when they don't have answers. They say it's in his nature to be in a certain way, fixed. And when they do something that they don't understand, they say it's free will. These two words are contradicting each other because one says you can do whatever, and the other word says you're fixed in some areas. That is a contradiction. So they are used to, instead of using this word, which we feel is appropriate, I don't know. I don't know how come this person does this and that. Instead of being honest with our language, we have substituted it with these words regarding people. And we use free will or human nature instead of saying, I don't know how come this person reacted in this way. So the way we view it is that all people, everything in the universe is affected. It is moved by something else. And I'm just going to see here my notes. So this person that is suicidal around 30, that's his culture. That is his surrounding. That's what he's seen. That is what he accepts. Now, I'm just going to touch upon this. And the last thing is that genetics. How we view genetics as an influencer is also very different. And this took me a very long time to understand how Jacque means it. It's very different from what we're used to. Now, you might say genetics creates the color of your eyes, and we don't say that. We say that it's a part of, you can't just have one thing and say this creates that. What you're doing when you say that is that you are disregarding the environment. For example, if we would live in space for many generations, our bone structure would be different. And if they would analyze our genetics and say, why do we have so little bone structure? And they said, it's here. But what about the environment? So we have to have this environment, influences, and this is the outcome. That's how we view it. We don't look at just one thing and say, this is that. We say this plus this plus this plus this plus this. And an example that I use to try to explain genetics, the way we view it, is this cake. Now, Marge, if I would give you this recipe and I say, can you make this cake? You say, of course I can. I have the recipe in front of me. I say, fantastic. Here are the tools I would like you to use to make this cake. Now we know that the result will be different because you don't have an oven, and these are the environmental influences. And then you create something and I say, what is this? I gave you this recipe, and you say, but the tools you gave me are different. The environment was different, and therefore the result is different. So this is how we learn to view things, to look at them as like domino bricks. How come this person did that? And then we don't look at the person, That's the end result. We look at the influences behind them. This is basically it. These are two words that usually come up. They are unavoidable while discussing this subject. If you present the greatest vision of the future, these words will always come up because they say that, well, it's in human nature to go to war. And we ask, what are the influences that make people go to war? Because we feel that if you change what drives people to go to war, if that is not there, we can't see how they would go to war. It's like going to the beach and you take up sand and say, this is mine. And I say, take it. I don't care, because there is so much of it that you put it in your pocket and you say, I'm stealing it in front of the police. They would just go away. They wouldn't waste their time, because in that environment, stealing, it is so abundant that nobody cares. I will stop there. These are the two words. That's how I usually present this. Please, Marge, if you have any questions or anything, anybody else, any thoughts about this particular thing that is not clear? Okay.
I find it interesting that you put those two, free will and human nature, as two opposites of each other. I had never thought of presenting them that way.
Yeah. Was it, would you say that you agree that how they represent two different things? That was clear, right?
Well, I can see two opposing assumptions there. One is deterministic, and the other one is that there is no determinism at all. So yeah, I can see definitely how you would present them as opposites of each other, and you cannot believe in both.
Yeah, then it becomes contradictory. Right? Yeah.
But rather, I think, what was it, this Dr. Gabor Mate, right? The behavioral psychologist. He kind of came and he said that, there is, you can't understand genetics without the environment, and you can't understand the influence of the environment without the genetics. I mean, they're part of, they're in symbiosis and harmony with each other, right? Because your example, like if we lived in space, we would look different. Yes, we would. Because it's a different environment and it influences us. I believe another example that's been discussed previously was kind of a simple one, that children born in Holland a given year were way more obese than children born any other year. Well, why those children? Why did they become obese? Well, because during a certain part of the trimester, the last trimester, the mothers were all starving because the Nazis were being kicked out of Holland, but not quite, and they had no food for months because they weren't being prioritized. So they were starving, literally starving, and that triggered a different genetic response in these children, such that if they saw food, they were much more likely to just shove it in their face no matter what. So I mean, our genetics are malleable to the environment before we're born and even after we're born.
The epigenetics
Yes.
is something that starts to go into this. That there is a lecture about it that we have gone through, and that is very similar to the points that we're trying to make here, that it isn't fixed. The more you learn about a subject, and this was the point I made last time, is that the more you learn about something, the more you step back and say, what are the influences? First, you go narrow and look at, for example, a criminal. You say, here he is. the more you learn, you step back and say, what was the environment that shaped this behavior, instead of focusing on the individual. And that's how we would like to approach problem solving, to always step back as far as we can. And that's how Jacque's work is that he tried to fix things and he saw that you can't fix this. I'm doing patchwork. I have to step back and see what is the major problem in society. And he determined that it is the system of capitalism, how we, function as a society. That's the major problem that creates other problems. So
But not just capitalism, right? All the other ones too.
yes, but because it is dominant today, that is the main focus. Do you mean like communism? Is that what you're?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, it's so I try to avoid mentioning the word capitalism a lot, because then you end up in this projected duality, right? Where people always assume that if you're not for capitalism, well, then you must be a communist, because you assume there are only two things, right?
Yeah.
Where there's any number of different ways you may want to orient the society, right? But
Exactly.
people don't see that
Yeah.
because you're always being conditioned to see things as opposites.
Yeah. And that reminds me, for example, for a colleague of mine, we were talking at lunch, and she said, it feels like there is no vision of the future anymore. And that's what this is, that it gives you a different perspective instead of what we have been taught, because those are just going in circles, and we're seeing that it isn't, nothing, it's not going to come something great out of it. It's just spiraling down. This is what the Venus Project means to us. It's giving us a new way of looking at what can be. Will it be exactly like that? We are not concerned with that. We just see it as these are the possibilities of the future. We see now that our society is restricting. It could be so much better. So when we see, for example, basic income, to us that is not enough. That is a stepping stone, because our vision is surpassing that. So we're not satisfied. We say, okay, that's okay, but we see it as patchwork. You're doing it to keep the system going. Okay, we understand, but we see that the possibilities can be even greater. Let's surpass this, and that's what we're trying to talk about and try to show other people that there is another way.
Hey guys, do you mind if I will screen a video about how environment shapes behavior?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I don't know if you know about this story. It's a story about a Russian or Ukrainian girl who been raised by dogs. If you heard
I've
about
seen
this,
it, yeah.
yeah, just
Yeah, I've heard about that. Yeah, in India too. India, I've heard of this as well.
so how I can do it?
Share screen, and then you have to put on the audio. How long is it?
Oh, I want to show it very quick.
Yeah,
I
sure.
will skip some moments. So strange.
Do you have the share screen option?
Okay, I will send you a link. Maybe you can play.
Okay, send me.
Can you see this?
If you put it in the chat.
Oh, okay. I thought I'm sharing. Okay, I never shared it, but okay, let's see.
Okay, let's see here.
So this is evidence that we've been learned to behave this way.
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
This is an evidence that humans been learned to behave in a certain way. It's not we born. When we're born, we're empty.
I'm sorry, for some reason I can't hear. Can you say it one more time?
I just wanted to say that we've been learned to behave this way anyway. Like I was speaking now, I learned some way how to behave.
Oh,
So,
yes.
Yeah. Okay, let's see it. I always forget to put the audio.
Girl, neglected, rejected, abandoned by her parents. For comfort, she snuggles up in the farmyard kennels with the dogs. That becomes her home, they become her family for the next 6 years. They protect her, feed her, maybe even love her, and in return, she begins to act like them. It's a remarkable case, one that startled the world of science, especially when the doctors tried to teach her to be a normal child. In fact, the film you're about to see reignites the whole nature versus nurture debate, and it could make you think twice about the way we bring up our kids. At first, this looks like some kind of strange hoax. Ukrainian girl, Oksana Malaya, running, jumping, eating and barking, just like a dog. But this is no fraud. Oksana's behaviour is the result of the most cruel childhood neglect. Neglect that began when she was 3.
Mum had too many kids. We didn't have enough beds, so I crawled to the dog and started living with her.
Her parents were alcoholics, and one night, too drunk to care, they left their infant daughter outside in the cold. Looking for warmth, Oksana crawled into the farm kennel. Curling up with the mongrel dogs probably saved her life.
I would talk to them, they would bark, and I would repeat it. That was our way of communication.
For the next 6 years, from the age of 3 to 8, the kennel was Oksana's home, and the dogs her family. She had very little human contact, and when finally discovered, it was obvious there'd been catastrophic consequences for Oksana's development.
She was more like a little dog than a human child. She used to show her tongue when she saw water, and she used to eat with her tongue and not her hands.
Oksana is now 22 and lives in a special care home. Remarkably, she is able to speak, able to communicate some feelings, and that's some progress.
Well, I remember her when she was initially brought here. She wasn't like a human being. She was like a small animal. About half a year later, she had completely changed.
But certain situations still trigger deeply ingrained responses.
When I feel lonely, I find myself doing anything. I crawl on all fours. This is how lonely I am. Because I have nobody. I spend my time with dogs. I go for walks and do anything I want to. Nobody notices.
When we're talking about how does a child learn to live with dogs, there's obviously no deal as such, but there's give and take. So the dogs are giving their love, their attention, their acceptance in a sense, and what the child must give is that they've got to learn to adapt to the dog situation, and if that means eating raw meat and scavenging a rubbish tip, that's what they're going to have to learn to do, because otherwise they're not going to survive. I'd like you to ask Roxanne if this house is a particular place she knows.
Using drawings, child psychologist Lynn Fry tries to determine what damage the years spent with dogs have done to Oksana's intellectual and social development.
A drawing of...
Yes, well, yeah. Sorry, it's too fast, but I just wanted to show behavior.
Yeah. I always watch at twice the speed. Sorry about that. Sometimes I go up.
Your brain is very fast.
Yeah, but when you get used to that, you can't go back.
It helps with the focus.
Yeah, and because, for example, if there's a 1-hour lecture, I would rather be focused for 30 minutes than, draw it out. But some people, they speak very slowly, and then that's what I usually do. But for example, this person, to us, we wouldn't use the words normal or aberrant. We would say this person, that's the environment they came from. And I'm going to give you an example. Let's see if you enjoy that, Marge. But this is one example I enjoy from Jacque Fresco, because he used to work as a psychologist, and his approach was a bit different. And let's see if I remember it. But he gives an example of a person coming to meet him, and he says, I get paid, and I take my money and I go drinking and gambling. And Jacque says, okay, what's your problem? And he says, well, we don't have food. The kids don't have food. They're going to turn off the lights. They're going to take off my car. And he says, okay, what's your problem? And after talking to him, he realizes that he didn't want to come there. His wife sent him there. And he says, you don't have a problem. Your wife has a problem. Send her to me. Because this is the way he is. He's not looking for help. This is the way he is. But it is the wife that isn't sleeping. She's the one with the ulcers. She's the one in pain. She needs help to get out of the situation. That person is in the situation, and that's the way they are, but they're not seeking help. It's another person saying, you need help. That's the person. That's how we view it. If you say, you need help, then if I say that, you need help, then I need help because I'm not sleeping. That's the way the person is. It is, I remember an example from Russia when people were trying to flee, this was the Cold War, they were trying to flee to the other side. And then the psychologist, they would grab them and bring them to a psychologist. And the psychologist would say, where are you going? This is the best country in the world. And that becomes a problem because the psychologist says to them, this is normal. This is how you should be. But this person wants to get to the other side. Whatever, if that's good or bad, that's another discussion. But that's where they want to go. So his approach was different, but that's how he views people, is that they are whatever they are based on their environment. He doesn't judge them. Some people might feel he's cold. And I remember that let's say he doesn't want to be emotional, let's say that. And I had a person that used to come to my lectures. She was very, let's use this word, emotional. Very, suddenly she would start crying in the sessions. And she had a great love, the way she would describe it, for him. And she went and met him in Florida. And I was always thinking, how will he react to her? And when she came there, he saw how she was and he hugged her and he put her next to her and said, you can sit here with me. He wasn't judging her, be mechanistic, be like me. He's not like that. He accepts them as they are because he doesn't view them as good or bad, just as their environment. That's how he looks at them. So that was a eye-opener. These two examples is how I would say how he works with or how he views people. I think it was one psychologist, tried to find his name, but he worked like this. It was somebody similar to that had this attitude. If you want to help somebody, you can't judge them. If you start judging them, it's not going to work. You have to have a viewpoint that this is the way they are. This is the person you have in front of you, whatever it is. Yeah. So that's the psychology bit. And we feel that we can, that's why we have such an, let's say, confidence in that we can have a better world. Because we don't deal with the products, which are people. We deal with the environment. And we feel that if we change the environment, you will get a different outcome. If you want people to not steal, not to hurt each other, then you create that environment. For example, if things are available to everybody, whatever you want, the best that humanity can create is there for you. We can't imagine that you go to another person's house and say, I'm going to steal your TV, because you will have access to that. That's why we have this confidence, is because we accept environment shapes behavior. Change the environment, you will get a different outcome. But we don't say good or bad, we say more appropriate to the times we live in. That's how we view it. So I've been babbling a lot, but this is the standard.
It's good. I'm just thinking that we are here today at this point. We wish to change the environment to drive a different kind of behavior. What I don't understand yet is how deeply ingrained is behavior. How much of the behavior will change given the different environment, And what are the resistors or abuses that you carry over? I mean, if you take an individual and you put them in a different environment, there will be a period of adjustment. If you tell someone that, well, you can have all the iPhones you want, great, I want 100 of them. What for? You can only use one. Yeah, but I want 100. Can't I have 100? The desire to have more, that beyond beyond rationale, is something that's ingrained in us. It's something that I think you're rewarded for. It's part of the reward system in this social order that we live in today. So I don't understand how will the transition actually happen. We've talked about it before a little bit, and basically this social order has to collapse first in order to build another one, is one theory anyway.
So I'm going to take it from a different viewpoint, just to, let's see if we meet on the same point at the end. So if aliens would come here and they would study us, what they would look for, what we think they would look for, is to see how appropriate are people to their goal. Now, we define appropriate as working in the physical world. The more people do things that correlate with the physical world, the more appropriate they are. To us, a car mechanic is highly appropriate at work because he looks at the physical object and he works with it, but he brings his knowledge, his past experience, but if something new occurs, he doesn't say, well, the Bible of car mechanics say this. No, he works on the tasks and he tries to solve the problem. He's working with the physical. The problem, what is inappropriate, is when we work more with our interpretations of what is going on. For example, religion. It doesn't have physical connections. So the more people are in that realm, then you will have more problems because they're living in their own head. And that is the problem, to get them to become more, let's say, let me just turn off that. So they become more functional with the physical things. Are you following along, Alex? Is that clear?
I will listen to the recording. Don't worry.
Yeah.
I cannot distract you always when you.
No, do it, because it assists me. It was not clear. Would you like me to say it in a different way? Let me try. Yeah, okay. So let's say you have a goal in mind. You want to go to a particular place. If you sit and pray and say, God, take me there, we feel that it is inappropriate because you're not working with the physical to get you there. You have a belief that something will happen, which might, but if you take it on and say, I have a vehicle or I have two legs, this is what I have to work with, and you use that to get there, that is appropriate. You're working with the physical world. What is in the world that I can use to get to my goal? So that's how you look at performance in people. How well can they get to that place? Now, what Stefan was asking, how can you get the inappropriate behavior out of them? Well, that is, I don't have a clear exactly how you would go about it because we haven't done that work. But we know that, for example, hoarders can get help. There is ways of helping them. Is it the best way? Well, there are ways. There are ways to get people that are alcoholic to stop that behavior. Whether it is good or bad, we're not getting into that. We're just saying there are ways of changing people. And that's what happens when you go to a new place to work. They say, this is how we behave here. Would you like to stay here? Money is a motivator to get you to change your behavior. So the problem would be is that there is no solution to changing this type of personality. But we don't have that. We just say that we think that if you change the environment, you can change that behavior. Let me give you an example that came up to mind right now. For example, I did this with my kid. I don't want them to watch certain things. I don't like some cartoons and whatever. So what I did was I gave them a repeat of the same cartoon, but a short segment of it, like 30 seconds, fast looping over and over again. And they became very bored with this type of cartoon because I didn't want them to watch that. So whenever that one came on, they're like, not that one. That is terrible. Don't show me that particular cartoon. So whenever that one comes up, they have a painful memory of being very bored. And I kept looping it. And whenever they said, let's watch something else, I was like, no, come on, one more time. Oh, it's so much fun, until it became ridiculous. So there are ways of changing it. And that is the beginning of the transition to change behavior. But the real changer is not sitting with a person and talking to them and say, you should be like this. No, change the environment and then you get a different outcome.
Maybe a person who wants 100 iPhones can be a distributor. So you deliver to him 1,000 iPhones, say this belongs to you. But if you wish, you can give it away to someone around your neighborhood.
Yeah.
That's clever.
Whatever they want, remember the sand example. Whatever they want has been influenced by the environment. But if you take the same person that wants 100 televisions and you say, here's 100 tons of sand, they don't want that because their culture hasn't reinforced them for that particular thing. They have been reinforced to want this particular thing. If they would get it in a resource-based economy, they couldn't do anything with it. There is no reinforcer for them to continue that behavior. The reinforcer is a problem if it's for themselves, the way they are thinking. If they're not seeking reinforcement from others just for themselves, then you have a bigger problem. But you can change all of that. You just have to change the environment. Exactly how? We have to try it out. But we don't toss them aside and say, there is no hope for you. We just say, we don't have an appropriate approach at this time. Let's try another system. Oh, now he just wants 50 iPhones. And we say, great, there is progress. There is no going from 0 to 100, but we watch that. Is there progress? No, it's okay, step back. But we don't view...
So iterative approach is one other theory that might work then, is what you're saying.
Can you say it one more time? Can you say it one more time?
So the iterative approach is kind of what you're suggesting here, right?
That was a new word for me. Can you please explain it? Iterative?
Iterative, yeah, stegvis.
Ah, okay. I haven't heard that one before.
No, and then, well, I think about it quite a bit because I work with people in marketing from time to time. And they are literally paid to influence people to do something else.
Yeah.
The people in marketing, marketing departments typically get quite a sizable budget. They get a lot of money. And if you add up all that money that all the companies are spending on marketing, we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars a year to influence us, to do things. Political campaigns notwithstanding, you know, they do it as well. So yeah, if a government does it though, we tend to get very cautious because we don't trust the government. It's propaganda. Well, corporate propaganda is marketing, right? That we readily accept. So the question could be, is there a way to, of course, we can bring up children in school to have a different value system. Maybe we need to deliberately direct what would be a better value system, or at least parts of values that we should change. I do see it happening in regards to, how should I say, sustainability, right? I mean, there's a lot of marketing, there's a lot of political discussion, but not the hundreds of billions of dollars worth of marketing, because then we wouldn't really have a problem today, I don't think.
Yeah. So now you're touching upon an important aspect of this, which we're gonna go into now, and that is, how do you know what is appropriate? Because when we think of a new way of doing things, for example, our approach, then somebody that is new to this might say, well, who's going to be deciding what is appropriate? And our approach is very different from what we're used to. And I'm going to try to explain this. Okay, so long time ago, when we started with agriculture, there were a lot of problems. And when people didn't know what to do, they might pray, they might sacrifice somebody because they didn't know how to solve it. Now, if you would go to a farmer today and say, you know, your crops are dying, if the person has a lot of solutions of what to do, and you say to them, let's pray, they say, no, I have many different things I can do. I can water, I can do this and that. I have things to do. I don't have time for that. When they don't know what to do, that's when they say, let's pray, because I don't have any more options. So the more we learn as a society, the less we work with the superstitious. We just use our approach. Now, how does the Venus Project decide, you know, what is appropriate? And it is based on the scientific method, okay? So there is no longer sitting around with people in nice suits saying, I think we should do this. This is what I like. There is no more of that. We don't uphold Jacque Fresco and say, he is the wise one, show us the way. What he has given us instead is a tool to use to see what is appropriate. Now, for example, let's go to a different planet because it might help us to understand this. If we would have, let's say we have a colony on Mars, the children that are brought up there are given an orientation of that planet. If they're going to be staying there, that is the first orientation they get. This is the planet you live on. These are our problems living here at this time. We don't have enough, we don't have a surplus of water. We have difficulties with handling oxygen. So it is the environment that determines what is appropriate behavior. If you would have an abundance of water, for example, here on Earth, if we would be able to turn salt water to drinkable water, then it isn't part of the orientation because it's so abundant. But it isn't my opinion. It's based upon how the circumstances look. That's basically it. It's very different from what we're used to. So the world we talk about, Marjorie, there is no more leaders. There is no more, we're going to listen to this person. We just say this. What do you base that upon? If somebody would say something, it's always, what do you base that upon? Show us your findings. Show us your research. And if it goes against all that we know, but we see your research, we will adapt. Then we are the problem. We will change the system if the research is appropriate. We will try it out. We will see, is it valid? But it is the findings in the physical world that determines how this society will move. That's why this project is so different from other isms, communism and all those, because it no longer depends upon leaders, and we don't have democracy anymore. That beautiful word that we're used to being so nice, that we can't even imagine a world without a democracy. Democracy to us means that people don't know what they want. If they knew what was better for society, they wouldn't ask. They would implement what is more appropriate. I used to work at a place, and I remember we were specialists. Everybody were in different areas, and we would meet once a month and discuss problems. And whenever my boss was like this, I don't know what to do, then we would vote, because nobody knew what to do. But to us, it is more appropriate to say, let's look into it and find an appropriate approach, instead of asking everybody what is their opinion. Let's try to find out the appropriate way of handling something. That's what you have in a hospital. Rarely does the doctor turn to, the cleaning lady and say, what do you think? That is not appropriate in that space, because it is their specialty. That's what they're supposed to be able to handle. If they don't know, well, that's fine. But go to the appropriate places to find the answers. Don't just say, let's vote. Should I cut here or there? I don't know. Let's just go for it. See what happens,
Let me give you another example to discuss that may be political or has become political just because of recent news. But everybody on the call, you might not know that Sweden has received a pile of criticism for the way we've handled the coronavirus. Well, the fact is that in this country, the government didn't feel that they knew what to do. So we have rather strong executive services, the institutions or organizations that specialize in certain things. One is kind of the Folkhälsomyndigheten, which is the Center for Disease Control here in Sweden. And they are the ones who provide recommendations. And the government just acts as a legal waiter, if you will. And so what we did here was entirely based on what the scientists working with disease control thought was the best thing to do for this particular disease. And boy, did we get criticized internationally by everyone. This is kind of back to the question I was asking. If you want to influence someone or come up with a new example and try to implement it, there will be, of course, resistance. Will there not?
Do you mean in this society or in a resource-based economy?
Well, they're going to have to both exist for some time, right?
Yeah. So
Probably generations.
yeah. So the way we view that is that as long as there is more benefits for me to do it my way, then I will resist. In a resource-based economy, the environment, let's jump the problem areas, but let's say we have jumped in 5 generations into a society where you have what I have, the best that humanity can provide. Okay, and I've seen it all my life. Now, what in that society, the more appropriate we are, the more I get. So there is high benefits for me to see my faults. If you would say, well, that is not appropriate, I have found this, the attitude is very different from today's society. In today's society, you're putting me down. I might lose my job. Now they don't respect me. I don't have those problems in a resource-based economy. I'm working not to get more benefits directly. I'm working to solve a problem. If the problem is solved by you, I'm happy because my goal was not to do it for myself. It was to solve the problem. That was my work. So the attitude becomes very different because I'm not getting other benefits by putting you down. Then you won't have that aberrant behavior, or we're trying to remove bias, which is not possible to fully remove. It is if we use tools that we agree upon, such as the scale. If you have a scale where you show how my findings were inappropriate, then I'm not yielding to your personal views. I'm yielding to the scale. And I say, I see now. I agree upon the scale that you're using. It weighs 2 kilos. Okay, I didn't have a scale, but now that you do, and I agree with your findings. So, but you don't have that in today's society. And that's why all research that is done today has huge problems, because there are many personal agendas. There are personal benefits to not cooperate, to put other people down, to change my results. Because the company that financed me, I know they want a certain result. And if I find that result, they will continue to give me more research, money
So
for research.
that's kind of one of the things I wanted us to think about, maybe till next time or something like that. What could you possibly do to mitigate that friction? I've been thinking about it myself for a while, and arrived at a few suggestions, but I haven't pressure tested them at all. Just kind of inspiration to myself. And just as you said, when the key that you mentioned there was that as long as it's more beneficial for me to support the current paradigm, then I'm unwilling. I will resist any kind of change. Well, what about? And then I'm thinking about, okay, so Roxanne and the Venus Project, they're working right now on trying to select a piece of land where you can build this research center and invite people there to work on it. The thought occurred to me that, well, I'm sure they've discussed this a lot, but why not select some place where people would readily want to accept even a very basic structure, like a resource-based economy. Take, I don't know, a very poor country, poor area somewhere where the alternative is essentially starvation.
Yeah.
You will be very happy for any kind of domicile that you're given, and education and all that kind of stuff. And it needn't cost a whole lot. And someone might even be willing to pay for it from the United Nations or Gates Foundation, something like it would move you in one step closer to a goal. At least try it out in that environment.
Yeah. There is an example where Jacque, he was approached, it was many years ago, by a person from India. And she said, oh, I've seen, how you build structures and this and that. Can you help these people? And he started to show, what they can create. And she said, no, these are simple people. They want these kinds of houses. And that's the problem we have, is that when a person approaches and say, can you help us? They have a package with them in today's society and say, yeah, don't go too far. Don't, what is this egg-shaped sphere-like houses? That's not nice. And then you have these problems. And even the people that you put in there, because it's so different from what they're used to, they will have, you have to first educate them in today's society, educate them, and then put them in there. So you have all of these, I can't hang my religious statues on the walls because, it goes sphere-like, something like that. Those creates problems. Of course, if somebody would come today and say, can you do this? I think they would take it on, but they wouldn't take it on halfway and say, you can put a Coca-Cola logo everywhere. Then they would say, no, that's not really what we're doing. So this organization is not really about 100 people going out and creating their own village and say, this is it. We are trying to change the whole system. Yes, it could be a stepping stone, but to us that understand it, we wouldn't, even if I would live in a city like that, I would say this is the beginning. A fully resource-based economy, which we want to implement, is when you have the whole world united, just like you have today with capitalism. They're using the same system. It is when you have the whole system using a resource-based economy. They're all under the same system, working towards same goals. There are no more separate nations. There are no more borders. Then you have the beginning, and then you just go from there. But everything else is just a stepping stone. It's not there yet. It would just be to demonstrate and say, this is a possibility. This is what it looks like. And when you build that first city, then they would say to you, is this it? Why don't you have 10 cities? You should have 10 cities. And that will, I think, always be the problem, is that even if you build it, people will always say, you should do more. We will do more as soon as we can. At this time, this is what they're working with. So the way, let's just touch upon the transition, because that is also something a lot of people wonder about, Marjorie. How do we get to this new world? How do we view it? The way we view it is that it will never come about by sitting down and talking with people and saying, what do you think about this? It doesn't work that way. People change, societies change when the environment changes. Let's take COVID, for example. Now, if I would gone to Trump 1 year ago, and I would say to him, hey, Mr. Trump, thank you for talking to me. Could you give $1,200 to everybody? Just random? He would say, never. The circumstances change, and then suddenly they did something different. And that's how we view this coming about. The major effector of this society will be automation. the more everything gets automated, it's inevitable that a company will automate, because people are a burden. They cost. They don't have people there because it's nice. Every company wants to reduce cost. If they don't, their competitor will, and they will lose the competitive edge. So they have to slowly automate. What happens is that if you automate too much, then you will have high capacity to produce, but nobody has purchasing power to buy what you're producing. So you say, I can create anything the world needs, but nobody's buying. Why should I produce? They say, be nice. I said, I didn't go into business to be nice. I'm here to make money. So they won't. And that will be the major downfall of this, of capitalism. So that's why we don't see it as necessary to protest. You don't have to do any of that. The system, by its own rules, will destroy itself because of wanting to reduce cost, tossing people out. People lose purchasing power. They can't buy what is being produced. The society stagnates. It puts the brakes on, says, you're not buying, I'm not producing. Then they will have to take another approach and say there is riots everywhere, and they will bring in people which are called systems engineers, and they say, how can you create a society? Oh, you have to leave. It's okay, Marjorie. Oh, I can't hear you.
I didn't know how long this was going to be. I have to go somewhere.
These never end.
Are you guys usually on for like hours?
No, like this should be around it, like 2 hours. We usually end
Okay,
it.
that's excellent. This is really, really, really interesting. I'm totally enjoying listening to you and meeting all of you, but I have to go somewhere. So,
No problem.
is there a way, how do I find out about your next meetings and how?
Are you in TVP International?
I have to go check. I'm not even sure.
Or you can add me on Facebook as well.
Okay.
Marsh, how did you come today?
A friend of mine posted the link about this, and I knew of the Venus Project. I've known of it for several years, but a friend posted the link, and so here I am.
Where is your friend? They're
I
like,
don't
here,
know. I don't
Marjorie, you go. I don't know what this is.
He's been posting your links for years.
Yes.
Videos from the Venus Project, and but I have lots of questions. I'll look you up on Facebook, Pageman.
Yes. Let's see.
And is TVP International a Facebook group?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll look.
Okay.
How often do you do this?
Every 2 weeks.
Okay. That's great because that's good continuity.
Yeah, I try. Yeah, it should be every 2 weeks. So,
That's
okay.
excellent.
So
Thank
very
you
nice to meet you.
Yeah,
All right.
really great to meet all of you. Thank you so much.
See
Take
you
care.
next time. Bye. Okay. So this session was really for Marjorie, I felt, but it was great. So just to continue, I was talking about the transition. When I talk, I'm just wondering, because I feel that this transition bit is the most difficult to get across. That a lot of people hear me saying it, and I used to hear Jacque saying it, but it took me a while to make that connection. Do you guys feel that? Do you make the connection, or do you feel that I need to repeat it? Do you remember what I have said before regarding this transition bit?
Yes.
You remember, yeah?
Yes, I was listening. Stan Asian and a guy from Turkey, and Jacque. Can you hear me? I will
Yes,
put
yes.
my head.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've been listening about transition from you, Jacque, guy from Turkey, and Stan Asian. So I know enough information for me to not ask questions, because to transition we still have a lot of things to do. So okay.
Well, I thought about it long before I ever knew about the Venus Project or anything like it, because I was working at a point in my career. What I was doing was essentially replacing people, always, with software. And I even started a consulting practice within the organization that I work with now, where they implement UiPath, which is essentially to automate about 60 to 60% of what office workers do today. So if you work in an office and you do stuff, you respond to emails, you handle customer queries and stuff like that, UiPath essentially automates that, including some logic, and some sections of the government here have implemented it to be able to, when you apply for bostadsbidrag, when they give you money, extra money to help pay for
Rent.
Rent, yeah. Then they do. The person who receives your application has to then look in the bank statements, see if you own a very expensive car, do you own a house, do you have other assets that you could use instead, what's your salary, how much taxes do you pay, or do you have dependents you need to pay for, all of these things, and has to do a judgment call. And today, several of these municipalities have implemented UiPath, which means they no longer need to be concerned with working with their computers. And instead, being government employees, they instead work with the citizens, the customers, and meet them and talk to them. If it was a company, more than likely, they just find a reason why you should go work somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right.
Here in New Zealand, I received benefit because I wasn't working, and my partner's salary changed, and we changed it in the computer under our account, and our benefit changed, and no one asking any questions. So we've been receiving automatically. Next day they repaid us the difference which they owed to us, because the changes happened for last few weeks. So it's automatically recalculating, and we've got the pay. So when I'm going to start my work, I'm going to declare this is my first salary, I received it this date, and they're going to recalculate, do we have enough money for our survival or not? So no one called, no one speak anything.
No, it certainly helps when like New Zealand was like 3 million people, right?
So 5 million people already.
5 now. Oh wow, that grew. It's still a database you could run on a laptop.
Yeah, exactly.
It's still a database you could run on a laptop. 5 million records. Yeah. So the smaller countries are easier to modernize than.
In a size like Japan. In Japan, it's 150 million people.
Yeah.
But here it's just 5 million people. It's so empty. And here people think that all problems, and some people think all problems we're facing now in the world are just because too many people. And I'm trying to give them understand.
It doesn't help. It doesn't help, I think. There is a video by a guy, let's see, what was his name? Oh, I must have lost it.
Yeah, because in New Zealand, which video you said? Yeah, okay.
Oh, no, it was this guy who was discussing about the fishing practices in China. Because he had lived in China. He's a South African guy, and he'd lived in China, married a Chinese woman, and now they moved to the US. So I felt more comfortable criticizing China since he wasn't living there. And what he did was he showed a whole video explaining the cultural behavior with respect to fishery, and they quite literally have completely fished out the South China Sea. So there is no more fish near China. So what these huge fishing fleets do is they go wherever the fish is, and they completely ignore any kind of quotas and rules, and they just grab it, wherever they can get away with it. Kind of like children, when you put a pot of, a little bowl of sweets on a table, they attack it and they just all grab it. And I think if we're going to have that kind of behavior, we are definitely too many people, because there's no way that we can feed 1.2 billion people with fish from everywhere, right? I mean, just blatantly grabbing everything that they can. I mean, there were over 1,200 fishing vessels off the coast of Galapagos, just up to the border of where they're not allowed to go in the sanctuary, right? And really, really fishing very, very hard, because the fish don't stay just in the sanctuary, so they've really impacted it a lot. They do the same around the African coasts, where you have lots of poor nations that are more than willing to receive a small bribe just to look the other way, right? And it's this kind of vacuuming of resources that happen. It's kind of, it will lead, well, like Fishman said, it will lead to a different environment for sure, and somebody's going to have to change. The thing I worry about sometimes is, well, then what's going to happen when it's just a simple part of the world ecology, like the fishing, the pyramid with the sharks on the top and plankton on the bottom. When this system collapses in the oceans, which scientists keep telling us it will, then what? Then what are you going to eat? We may only eat a little bit of fish. There are lots of populations that live off of fish. Now they're going to start migrating. We're going to get the conflict, et cetera, et cetera. You can envision it yourself, I'm sure. So I think that's kind of what they're thinking about when they're saying that, yeah, we're too many people. Yeah, if we manage the resources the way we do now, yeah, we are. If we want to be 10 billion people on Earth, then we're gonna have to do things a different way. We're all one. We'll find out the hard way.
About automation. So because our borders here closed for any immigrants who wants to come, we have a lack of employees who do dirty job, like picking, harvesting, cleaning and stuff. And local people, they don't want to do this job. Usually immigrants come, or backpackers like Stefan, who need some work for a short period. So because we don't have this kind of people, now New Zealand are very struggling, especially in dairy, because we're very dairy industry, lots of cows, and we really, we're struggling to find people, and they have to now work long hours, and we have to now start to think about automation.
Exactly.
And here we are, we're coming to the next step of automation in New Zealand. Before, if it's working this way, if people picking, we have enough people and we paid minimum wage, everyone's happy. Now we have no people, we start thinking about different ways.
So it's kind of like there is an inverse relationship to the price of labor and the evolution of technology, isn't there? I mean, I used to ask myself the question, why did the Industrial Revolution not happen during the Roman times? Because that would have been even more cool. But it didn't happen because they had a huge supply of slaves,
Yeah.
cheap labor. So they didn't need to, they had the steam engine. The Greeks had invented it 400 years before the Roman Empire was big. They had the steam engine. They had seen it in use, steam driving mechanical devices. It was known, but it wasn't, it was seen as toys, simply toys, because if you want the real work done, it's much easier to just tell these morons to do it for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same thing, and I can give you an example from today. I think I mentioned that before. My wife posted a video on Facebook where all these automatic lawnmowers here in Sweden were cutting the grass, and there was several of them you could see in the video. And people in America were posting questions like, "What are those? What are they doing? They don't use them there." Well, you know why? Cheap labor, $5 an hour. It's more cost effective to pay the neighbor guy or boy to do it, or like you said, cheap immigrant labor. So I think that having cheap labor available is good in the short run in this current socioeconomic system. But in the long run, you'll end up behind. So all the countries where labor is expensive, they use technology more.
Yeah.
Well, that's how we
Okay.
view.
I have soon. I have an interview, so yeah.
Are you going now? Okay.
Yeah.
I think, as we usually say, 2 hours is enough. So
Yeah.
let's round it up. And well, I'm very happy that you guys came. I was like, oh, nobody. I just messed up so much with this session, but
I just cannot understand. We have 25,000 people in the group, and no one just. I mean, so how's it happening?
this is the reality. Remember that it doesn't matter that you have 1 million followers. How many really are interested? How many of those really understand what this is about? And it's very few. So that this is a good way of seeing, where we're at when they say, why don't you build a city? Remember, 25,000 on Facebook, and it's difficult to get 20 people, to join to learn more about the subject.
Well, you need to learn some more about marketing.
Yes, and that's why we have you. And where can you please assist?
What do you suggest, Stefan?
Stefan,
Yeah.
we're waiting. Stefan, I'm gonna start.
Are you now?
I'm gonna start annoying you with a message. Hey, where are all the?
Well, I have a perfect colleague that would be able to really cause a lot of attention and stuff like that, and but to convince him to even think these thoughts twice, it would be.
Let me know if I can assist in a way, in some way. Let me know. Can I just ask you, Stefan, where in Sweden do you live? Where are you now?
Gothenburg. I used to live on Södermalm.
Okay.
But now I live in Gothenburg.
Okay.
Do you speak Sweden?
Swedish, yeah.
Yes.
And you Peshman too?
Yes, of course. Yeah, I was born.
Yeah, Peshman's even got a strong Swedish accent in English.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't insult you now, did I?
No. No.
Yeah. Let's go.
Okay, guys.
Well, good luck on your interview.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Good luck with that. Okay, see you in 2 weeks, guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Vi hörs sen. Ha det bra.
Tja.